Well, good morning. How is everybody today on day 3 so far of our World Congress? Today, our plenary session is going to focus on sustainability and decarbonizing transportation. All of you in this room know the statistics. Our sector is responsible for 15% of greenhouse gas emissions globally and 29% here in the United States. Yesterday, in a policy session with representatives from the US DOT, the US Department of Energy, and the EPA, we were reminded that the clock is ticking and urgency of action is critical. While there's a lot of near-term focus, particularly in the United States, on electrification, which is a key first step, we know we need to be looking at a systems approach to reducing emissions and achieving decarbonization, but doing so in a way that's affordable and equitable. Technology is a key tool in advancing cleaner and a more sustainable system, and it will also provide more access and mobility for people no matter where they live. Today, we are so fortunate to have as our keynote speaker, Tokes Omashaikin, who was appointed Secretary of the California State Transportation Agency by Governor Gavin Newsom in February of this year. Previously, Tokes served as Director of Caltrans, the California Department of Transportation. Tokes has been a leader nationally for promoting a safe, equitable, sustainable, and multimodal transportation system that builds on strong local partnerships. And California has been a leader in setting bold targets for emissions reductions that will drive action nationally. So with that, please help me welcome Tokes Omashaikin.
Morning. Morning, everybody. How's it going? Hopefully, over the last 3 or 4 days, you've had a chance to enjoy California and Los Angeles specifically. Get out and meet people and enjoy some of the good places to eat and some of the beautiful sights in our state. I'm pumped up this morning to share with you a little bit of how, from a high level in California, how we're embracing ITS and how it's going to play a role in how we move people and goods moving forward. There's always a lot of excitement about this space, about ITS, because of the efficiencies we know it will bring. But the thing that I'm really paying a lot of attention to as well are obvious things like the sustainable environmental impacts and the return on investment as well. That part is often forgotten. The fact that when we invest in ATS, we often get a better return on investment than sometimes the hard, heavy infrastructure that we invest in. So a little bit of a high-level overview. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get questions from everybody a little later. Well, let me jump into it real quick. So from California, my new responsibility, for those of you who don't know the responsibility, I've been in for 7 months. My prior responsibility, I was the Director of Caltrans, as was said in the intro. But new responsibility at CalSTA has oversight of 8 different entities. And the main responsibility I have for the governor and the people of the state is to make sure that efforts between all these entities is being coordinated and is in alignment with the direction that the leadership, the governor of California, wants to go in. So everything from high-speed rail, the Caltrans, to the Highway Patrol, the Transportation Commission, all those things, make sure it's being coordinated in an alignment with the policy views and the direction that Governor Gavin Newsom wants to take the state. And that direction, for the most part, falls under these, what I call the core 4. I mentioned this when I spoke here at the opening on Monday. These are in alignment with the vision and the outlook that Governor Newsom has for California. And these 4, and I'll talk about them just briefly before I dive in a little bit deeper. From a safety standpoint, California currently has 10% of all fatalities in the United States on our transportation system. Last year, that number was roughly 4,258 people died on our transportation system in California. More than any other state. We're just a little bit north of Texas when it comes to that. And increasingly, the most vulnerable users of the system are being impacted. We're at a 16-year high right now when it comes to safety incidents, well, not safety incidents, fatalities and serious injuries. From a climate action standpoint, 50% of the GHG in California comes from the transportation sector, more than any other sector in our state. I think by now you know that nationally the number for transportation is GHG is 20, and the international number is roughly 15 or 16% international. We're at 50. And the governor likes to say all the time, if you don't believe in science, because some people are still arguing whether or not transportation and emissions play a critical role when it comes to climate change and climate action. If you don't believe the science, believe your eyes. Believe your eyes. The things that are happening around us right now today, from floods, severe temperatures, severe storms, on and on and on, we can clearly see with our eyes the connection to the transportation sector. Equity is sort of the overarching theme for our entire state, for the entire state of California. The governor's theme is a California for all. And for us, that means every person, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of economic status, has an opportunity to succeed in our state. And we know from a transportation standpoint, we've made poor decisions in the past. We've made poor decisions in transportation that have impacted people negatively, and we want to reverse that. We want to reverse that and provide uplift to people across the state through the decisions we'll be making in transportation. And economic prosperity, the last of those four, is essentially means that every person from the unhoused all the way to major corporations in our state have an opportunity as well to succeed. So how does technology play a role in all these sort of big picture goals, the core four in California? It falls as well under some of these sort of regulated goals that we have for our state. Some of the goals that we have as well: zero traffic deaths and serious injuries by 2050 on our system. Carbon neutral by the year 2045. We want to get there. Institutionalizing equity. Fifth largest economy in the world. How does technology tie into this and help us excel in these areas? On that particular last point, we're roughly a $3.5 trillion economy today, California. We're competing with Germany to take over the fourth spot. They're at 3.8 trillion, roughly. We believe we can get there. And what will play a role in getting us to number four, we believe, is the continued investments in technology and innovation in California. So a little more detail on each one of these. From a safety standpoint, every state in the country is required to put together an SHSP, Strategic Highway Safety Plan. Every 4 or 5 years, each state goes through a process of updating it. In California, we've narrowed down to 4 things as our main priorities to be able to accomplish the goals of our SHSP. And if you notice, those 4 things that we've narrowed it down to, very much in alignment with the core 4 as well that I mentioned early on. From integrating equity into our decision making as we invest in a safer system, implementing a safe system approach. We were the first state to, when I was director of Caltrans, to put in place a policy aligning us with a safe system approach, first state in the country. Doubling down on what works. That essentially means we know the tools that when we put them in place will make the system safer. We know what they are. For example, rumble strips or median guardrails. Let's double down on those things that we know will make a difference and work. That's the third one. And the fourth piece, very much again in alignment with the discussion we're all here for in our SHSP, is continuing to advance technology as a part of the solutions that we're going to use to get the system to be safer. A couple of examples of using technology to advance that system: wrong way driving crashes. We have a rash of them in San Diego and in the Sacramento area. We've had a lot of wrong way crashes. Using pavement markings like the ones that you see that reflect at night, but in the daytime you don't even see them, that say do not enter. You don't see it in the daytime, at nighttime it reflects. If somebody's going the wrong way, they will repeatedly see those do not enter signs on the roadway. An intelligent truck attenuator. In California, our attenuator trucks get hit every other week in California, at least one time every other week. So imagine if an individual was in one of those. So we're piloting and testing an intelligent truck attenuator, again, to help make our workers who are working on our highway system, to help make things safer for them. When it comes to climate action, on the core four, ZEVs have now become the number one export from California. Nearly $5 billion. Nearly $5 billion annually is the value of our exports from ZEV. But here our big picture goes when it comes to ZEVs and helping us get to a cleaner and better climate. 1.5 million vehicles sold by the year 2025. Today we're at 1.2 million. We will surpass that goal of 1.5 million. 250,000 installed chargers. That one's going to be a challenge. The infrastructure related to getting us to be prepared for those ZEVs, that will be a challenge, but I believe we can get there. By the year 2030, 5 million vehicles sold. 2035, and on you see, and by the year 2045, 100% fully electric, heavy duty and passenger vehicles in the state. This is going to be a hurdle for us, a challenge for us, but we're leading the way. We're today 40% of the entire ZEV market for America, right here in California. But ZEVs will not create a utopia for our climate challenge. Let me be clear about that. They will be very helpful. It will be a big part of the change that we need when it comes to cleaner air and the environmental challenges we have in California, but it's not going to be the only way. We're going to have to build and create a more multimodal system, and use technology on the system to help us get there. Two examples that can quickly point to as it relates to this. I think many of people know how much of a role we play in goods and freight movement as well. When the supply chain challenge happened, more people became aware of how much of a role we play. The Port of Long Beach and the Port of LA have 40% of the containerized goods that come into America. 40%. And the 710 corridor, the image on the right, is one of the most heavily used truck routes in the entire country. It's often a bottleneck. We wanted to expand the 710 corridor, add a few lanes to it, but we've decided to dial that back and reimagine that corridor, the 710 corridor, and trying to figure out how technology and other tools can play a bigger role in helping to make that corridor more efficient for people and goods movement. Same thing, Harbor Drive, San Diego, one of the busiest ports in the country as well because of the major naval base down there. A lot of cars get shipped into the country from Mexico through this port in San Diego. Same thing. How do we use technology to improve Harbor Drive, freight prioritization systems, et cetera? Stop allowing trucks to go through neighborhoods to get to their warehouses and destinations. Make Harbor Drive, we're calling it Harbor Drive 2.0, make it more efficient. When it comes to equity and technology, I mentioned this at my opening remarks on Monday. Cal ITP is a tool that we are hoping will really take off in California and in turn have an impact across the country as well when it comes to transit. In California, there are more than 400 transit agencies. You can imagine in the Bay Area, it's probably about 30 transit agencies. Imagine trying to get from system to system with different payment cards, with different payment tools. We're working with a company out of the Netherlands called Rebel. They're helping us implement this too. We have 4 agencies in the state currently using it. But essentially what it is a card that you can seamlessly use across the board. It will make it more affordable, more equitable for people to be able to use transit in California. There's a lot of detail that you can look up on this, but I'll keep us moving forward. Great tool that we're hoping, again, will take off in the state and across the country. When it comes to economic prosperity, again, we currently in California have more unhoused people than any other state in the union. Nearly 160,000 people, conservative estimates, are homeless or unhoused in California. How do we help people from that very level of life in California all the way up to, again, the big economic engines? That's how we become more prosperous. The wealthiest state in the country can also afford to be the poorest state with the number of people who are struggling in our state. So we want to reverse this. One of the ways that we're doing this from the other end, the high end, if you will, is we're opening a new port. Otay Mesa East is a new port that we're opening in San Diego. When that port opens in 2 years, in 2024, it will have more ITS technology on it than any other facility in the entire state. Currently, our ports that are there at the San Diego region bordering Mexico, the wait times sometimes go from 6 to 8 hours of wait times for trucks to get in from Mexico into the United States, and sometimes even longer than that. By putting this port in, it's nearly a $2 billion investment, and the impact as well will be in that range. By putting this port in, we're talking about cutting wait times in half, and in some cases much less, 20-minute wait times. Again, same thing, the air quality impacts, the economic impacts for making this investments, we will definitely yield the dividends from it. And it goes without saying that we're also the major hub for connected and autonomous vehicles and advanced mobility in the country. Today, there are nearly 60 companies in California, 60 companies testing on our system. At least 4 million miles, roughly, is what we've estimated. 4 million miles in 2021 of testing happened. At least 7 of those 60 companies, at least 7 of them are testing fully autonomous vehicles, passenger-less, driverless vehicles interstate. So a lot of momentum in California as it relates to this particular area. We've been hyping CAV, connected and autonomous vehicles. We've been hyping it for many years. I believe it's truly about to be at a place where we're going to be able to get benefits from it. And I think what's pushing it, what's moving it even further along, is what's happening in the ZEV space. Increasingly, all the ZEVs that we see on the system have automated features, and it's pushing us further along as it relates to CAV as well. So, closing thoughts, I mentioned this, the core 4 that we have at CalSTA and its agencies, the departments under it, very much in alignment with the direction that Governor Newsom wants to go and the blueprint that he's set for California. From an economic standpoint, lowering cost, rebuilding California with infrastructure, and the fact that technology, even broadband, will play a big role in that, making California healthier. When we build a more multimodal system that is cleaner, it will also mean that it's a healthier state, a safer California, and again, that commitment to climate in our state is so important. So in a quick nutshell, that is how we will embrace technology from California through our core 4 priorities. And I think technology with the return on investment, with the environmental impacts that it will have, we will continue to embrace it and be a leader in ITS moving forward in our state. I would love to be able to take a couple of questions real quick. I don't think there are mics out there. I don't think they were prepared for this, but I would love to be able to take any questions. I have 2 minutes to burn, and I know they don't want to hear that backstage. But anybody with any burning questions about California and our commitment to the core 4 and ITS in general? Everybody's good? Everybody's bashful? Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, that's a real good question. He said, could I elaborate on Otay Mesa, that new port, and its connection to equity? You know, because of how expensive it is to live in our state, there are a lot of people. There are approximately 1.8 million Californians, not surprisingly, who actually live in Mexico, but work in California. And they're having to make that trip back and forth across the border. And that often means sitting at that border for hours and hours on end. So it means emissions, but it also means a waste of time, potentially, as they look to get to work. So those people, it will make it more, from an equity standpoint, sometimes those people are middle to lower income individuals or families who are living in Mexico and trying to get to the United States to work. So that investment in the port is not only good for goods movement, for goods, it's going to make a difference for Americans who live back on both sides of the border trying to get across. So those low-income people, it makes it more efficient for them and saves time for them to be able to get across as well. I think it's a very good question. I got 30 seconds. Somebody else. Yes, sir. I think I understand what you said. Will the port also help get goods onto rail? Is that what you said? That's a good question as well. It's part of the vision. It's part of the outlook. Just like most states in the union, most of our freight, 90% of our freight, moves on rubber wheels. But we know it's a cleaner way to go on rail. The efficiency of that is something that we're still trying to work on. We've got some challenges as it relates to rail over the last week. You heard some of those labor, I don't know if you're from the States, but you heard some of the labor-related challenges that we have. But we know it's cleaner. We can continue to work on the efficiency part of using rail, but it's clearly part of our goal. We know we have to get more from rubber wheels in our state to rail. It's just common sense. And that's how we did it for many years anyway, before on-time delivery sort of started to take off and we moved to highway. Anyway, thank you for that question. One last one. Yes, sir. Why we have homelessness? I think your question, just to be clear real quick, and I'll run, is why do we have a high level of homelessness in California? Have there been any studies done with that? Look, there are multiple factors. It's just not one thing. Obviously, the affordability of living in our state. California has, we're roughly 3 million units behind on building homes in California. So we don't have enough of a stock. So if you don't have enough of a stock, and it's also expensive, which means the demand is higher, you're going to have that. And there's some parts of our state, like here in LA and the Bay Area, where young graduates are making, $300,000-$400,000. And there are some people who are sort of more blue-collar workers who are making $40,000, $30,000. And so when you've got that high level of disparity between people who are making, $300,000-$400,000 and they're young, and the blue-collar worker, you're going to have a lot of issues like that. And that disparity in California is significant with the people who are making that kind of income and that. And so the fact that we don't have enough housing units, 3 million units short, also plays a significant role in why we're going through that in our state. But the governor, by the way, just real quick, the governor is investing more in the unhoused than any other state in the union, and more than the United States government itself. So we're up to $22 billion to try to reverse this issue. $22 billion. So governor's fully committed in making sure we can reverse that challenge, but it's going to take time and partnership, local, NGO to be able to get there. All right, thanks everybody. I think the panel's coming up next.
Please welcome to the stage Senior Vice President of Global Transportation Innovation at AECOM, Mr. Shaylin Back.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's always great to hear Tokes. He's such an inspiring speaker. I will say, Tokes, I love that comment. I've got 30 seconds left. It ain't a shot clock, man. You're not like trying to get it right down. Please, everybody have a seat. I'll also say that when Tokes was speaking, it's always inspiring because I think there is an opportunity for us to use technology for good. And on the climate side, it is so disheartening though when I hear Tokes say something like, we're having a rash of wrong way fatalities on highways. Like, we have put people on the moon, we have developed vaccines, we can do interspace telescopes, and we still have cars going the wrong way on a highway and killing people. Like, it is just such a clarion call for us to push and deploy technology as quickly as we can. So we have a fantastic global panel, and I think that's always a great hallmark of the ITS World Congress, depending on where we are in the world. So to my right is Ms. Sue Wiblin, who's the Executive Director of Emerging Technologies for Transport for New South Wales in Australia. I'm going to judge the audience by how much applause that they get versus I get here. In the middle, my former home DOT director in Washington, D.C., Mr. Everett Lott, who's the director of the D.C. DOT Department of Transportation. Immediately to his right is Ms. Margaret Anderson Kelleher, who's the Director of Public City Works, City of Minneapolis, United States. However, she was also the MnDOT Director and brings a really interesting perspective. And then finally on the far end, Mr. Gazim Okakoglu, the first counselor on mobility and transport delegation of the EU to the United States. So with that, we're just going to go down the panel, and I think there have been a couple of topics that Tokes raised, but just from your organization, how are you approaching the integration of transportation technology, such as ITS, into your commitments around climate and equity and helping underserved communities as you approach it?
Yeah, so thank you. We're doing quite a lot in Australia, and I think certainly for us, if anyone's been watching the news and what's going on in Australia, we've had a number of bushfires and floods, really much more than we ever have. So we're really seeing the impacts of climate change in Australia in a really big way. So we are in most states in Australia, so PTAs or transport authorities are statewide in Australia. So we find that most of the states have now targets for zero emission. And we have a real commitment to transitioning, particularly our bus fleets, to electric. But we have vast distances that we cover as well. So electrification is not going to be the only strategy for us. So we're exploring green hydrogen as well, certainly for our regional areas, and collectively as a federal government to look at that. We are the third highest emitter in sector in Australia for transport. So even if we look at our own fleets and look at electrification and green hydrogen strategies, it's still not enough. So we're installing large electric charging systems throughout the country as well, so that people can be encouraged to convert to electric vehicles, so private vehicles. But also outside of that, in terms of the building resilience for the organisation, for the country, we're also exploring a number of technologies, satellite technology and imaging, so that we can better respond to flood emergencies and to bushfire emergencies. We're also looking at quantum computing as well. So we've sort of been an early adopter in the quantum space to also look at optimizations and how we better deal with the impacts of climate change. Yeah,
I think that globally right now, whether it's flooding in Pakistan, You know, the fires in Australia, extreme heat in Europe, and drought in Europe. Here in the United States, we have, I mean, here in California, fires is a major issue, flooding. So, you know, I think that future we were all very concerned about is now very rapidly approaching us. I will say, from an Australia perspective, it was great. We were in Melbourne for the ITS World Congress, seeing all the great innovation there, and then the transport for New South Wales using the smart motorways, that concept, something we actually adopted in Colorado when I was a DOT director there. So
Yeah,
great stuff. Yeah. So Everett, I just saw in the news, I think DC is taking speed limits down now on major roads down to 25 miles an hour, 40 kilometers an hour from a safety perspective. Obviously, safety is a huge concern. So great stuff there. But from an ITS perspective, technology perspective, how are you weaving that in around climate goals or helping to deploy technology to help underserved communities?
Well, great. Well, Shaylin, thanks for the question. And I do want to bring greetings and welcome to everyone from Washington, D.C., where we have the unique distinction of serving as a local government, a county government, and also a state government. And so we have all those functions kind of wrapped up and combined into one. What we're doing in Washington, D.C., we're doing a lot of great work and a lot of great things as it relates to ITS and climate. One of the more important things we're doing is really trying to get people out of their single occupancy vehicles. So we've really invested very heavily into our car-free lanes and our protected car free lanes for buses to be able to travel freely and efficiently. What that is doing, and it's really encouraging people to get out of their cars and get into a very safe, reliable other mode of transportation, such as a bus. In addition to that, we have a lot of bicycle infrastructure that we've been putting into place, and also shared mobility infrastructure. We are trying to encourage individuals to look at other means and other alternatives as ways to travel, whether it's going to your place of worship, going to your school, going shopping, or just going to visit a friend. We have invested about 3,000 additional capital bike share, which is the district's bike share program. And that program is a DC regional-based program. So it not only supports people in Washington, D.C., but it's also in Maryland and Virginia. And so you can literally get on a bike in Washington, D.C., ride it into Virginia or ride into Maryland, and leave it at that destination. It's very affordable, and it's very efficient. And it's also very safe because we've implemented over 104 miles of bike lanes, 24 of which are protected right now. And we have a mandate to do about 30 additional bike lanes over the next 3 years. So those are some things that we're doing. It really has helped and improved how we're able to move around in the city. And ultimately, it is going to contribute towards our climate goals.
Yeah, I can remember living in Washington, D.C. in, like, say, 2010. And, you had to, get a cab to get to a lot of places. And when I was living there up until recently, you can get bike share, you can get a scooter, you can take the D6, which stopped right by our house, and it's become so much more of a livable city, and that's great, and really appreciate your work and the mayor's leadership in this space. So, Margaret, I was actually in Minneapolis earlier this year because AECOM has done a lot of work on the transit facilities out there, and that's a city that when you think about cycling, I don't know that I always would think about Minneapolis, but it's a cycling haven, lots of transit investment. So from a technology perspective, and both with your state and your now local experience, how are you guys deploying technology to achieve those goals?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Shaylin. And I'm going to show you a few pictures of Minneapolis and what we have going on. And I think to ground the conversation, and let's see if we can get that slide up there. We are governed by a family of plans in Minneapolis. And I would just say that to the point of both equity and climate, it's important to have a plan because technology for technology's sake would not be really an equitable thing to deploy. It's really important that we have this. So we're governed by a transportation action plan. I actually have a QR code at the end for you with that, and that links to all the other plans. Climate action plan in Minneapolis, Vision Zero action plan, and our 20-year streets funding plan. So what does it look like on the ground? Well, on the ground, I don't want to go too fast here. This is intersection Washington Avenue, and this is the beginning of what the plan looks like in terms of, you know, the street crossings, our ADA ramps. We're doing a massive amount of work to make sure that we are compliant with the federal law, which we should have been compliant a long time ago. Also showing you just why technology is so important. We have a light rail line that runs right downtown and a lot of bus lanes that actually cross that light rail line. So signal prioritization, the ability to make this efficient and to work together. We don't run the transit system. Our metropolitan government runs the transit system, and but we work very closely with them. And in fact, I want to just show you, you know, the guts of what it looks like. The guts of what it looks like is we are investing in larger boxes right now to be able to accept future technologies. We're often doing double boxes. We are going through a modernization process with our boxes right now. We're very open to working with vendors on new products that go in the box for signalization. Probably our next front to work on in terms of both equity, safety, and getting more people out of their cars to walk and bike are near miss analysis. And that is because we know where we have crashes. We know our highest intersections with crashes. But what we don't know is, what are we missing out there about this? I'm showing you right here the sort of collaboration that goes on to make signalization work in Minneapolis. Minneapolis traffic control, this is riding a Metro Transit bus and being able to work to make sure this signalization works to give transit priority. Huge part of equity and climate is being able to move those buses faster. We are getting electric buses, but we still have a diesel fleet largely, and so being able to move those vehicles through and give that prioritization. This was working on a project when we were actually doing some construction and being able to have that transit signal up there that you see, that it was a busy intersection, using the paint, a very simple technique, using the paint and the transit signalization to do this, giving that advantage. Mobility, I did a little trip out on the expo, on the Metro, out to Santa Monica yesterday here. I was really inspired hearing Shalita talk, and so I decided to take a little trip out. And I really loved that on their mobility signage, they actually have the rules. And so I'm going to bring that back, because that's often a thing, the conflict between generations on using micro-mobility, and older people not always loving that people are scooting near them or biking near them. But we have a very active, large scooter program between Minneapolis and St. Paul, the University of Minnesota campus. And this is also showing you one of our micro-mobility hubs that will show you how to get to transit, and also just showing that we are installing all over bicycle signals as well. This bicycle signal will give you a solid green, it'll give you a solid red, and a flashing yellow if you should be aware as a bicyclist. We have implemented an EV car share, and I think when you get to really working on climate and equity issues, we know the statistics. It is expensive to buy an electric vehicle. We have 120 of these EV car share cars within the city now. This means that you don't have to go out and buy the EV. You could maybe be a biker most of the time and need a car for a little bit of the time. The important part of this is to also say we have a goal to move 3 out of 5 trips out of a car, out of a single-use car. This is an important part of that. This is our new downtown Minneapolis. Hennepin Ave is one of the most important streets in downtown Minneapolis, running all the way through most of the city. Sorry, I should have brought the water out now. Excuse me. And what you can see here is actually the pedestrian sidewalk. But if you can see the gray on the sidewalk, that is a separated, totally separated and away from traffic bike path trail. I use that to go to work. I come down Hennepin Avenue, I go down 4th Street where there's another one of these, I arrive at City Hall 15 minutes later from my home. It is amazing. And this is the future. The future is being able to give people the confidence to get out of their vehicle and be safe as a cyclist, to be safe as a walker, and also safe riding the bus. This is going to be the next part of Hennepin Avenue where there's a $60 million investment by the state of Minnesota in a BRT line. This is 1.4 miles of that BRT line, so it's a 14-mile line, runs from the suburb of Edina into the city to the University of Minnesota. What you can see here is we are narrowing the roadway. This is right now a 2-and-2. We are going to a 2-3 with a turn lane in the middle for many important turns, but we are also giving that protected bikeway, we are giving a protected walkway, and we are giving a dynamic lane all the way in this 1.4 miles is where the BRT bus lane would get hung up the most. So I'm going to stop there. If you'd like to link to our Transportation Action Plan, which is really the overarching work that we're doing, and in that are the links to the other plans. I made a QR code. I have to say I was a little surprised the dinosaur was in the middle. I think it's a warning. If we don't change, if we don't make the change on climate and the change on equity, we might go the way the dinosaurs went. So let's, this is at least one example of how we're doing it in Minneapolis. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Margaret. I think the dinosaur may be the fossil fuel piece there, and I think we've, you know, look at that service. That's a round of applause for the folks from backstage there. That's
good service, thank you.
Yeah. You know, when I was listening to your presentation there, it was I love the transit, the signal preemption. I was in Dubai earlier this year, and they're starting to do that because Dubai dealing with a lot of traffic challenges, and I think we'll be there for the World Congress maybe in 2 years' time. And then when you're putting the part about the boxes and the oversized boxes, I think that's always a challenge for us with technology. And I always loved what Utah did with all the dark fiber that they went out and put out there in anticipation of it being needed. So I love the idea of, you know, just using those dollars now to sort of prepare for the future. So that's great. And then I love the cycleway, and it's the transition to maybe the European side. We were in Copenhagen a couple of years ago for the World Congress there, and I remember walking outside my hotel, and you know, we think about rush hour in the United States with cars, and rush hour there, the capacity is with bikes. I think it's like 70% of the trips in Copenhagen are on bicycle, and they're having to expand that infrastructure. And what struck me was that back in the 1940s and 50s, it was a car-choked city, and they made intentional choices to invest in bicycles and other infrastructure. And so, you know, Gizim, from a European perspective, obviously sustainability is a very important issue. How are you guys balancing technology along with climate goals and underserved communities?
Yeah, thank you, Shannon, for the question. And you're right to mention that probably the geography and the density in Europe is slightly different to what we have here in the United States, and that we really rely on very dense cities. And where, when you think about it, the multimodal dimension is built in historically. There were metros 100 years ago, but also now we have indeed this trend going towards more active mobility. It changes a bit the overall pattern. And it goes in the right direction. Why? Because you alluded to, we live in times of crisis. We had the COVID crisis not so long ago. It affected transport dramatically, aviation more than other modes of transport, but all modes of transport. We learned also from this time on how to build resiliency in our network. But we have a very existential one that you mentioned. It's climate change. And as in the US, we have the climate contribution, the greenhouse gas emission contribution from transport is the highest of all sectors. In Europe, it's roughly 25%. And the bad news is that contrary to all the other sectors, the greenhouse gas emission from transport have continued increasing in the last year, with the exception of the years of COVID, where we see some positive elements there. but certainly there is no complacency there. And clearly, as Europe, we were pushed actually by our citizens when they elected the previous European Parliament, and then when we had the previous or the current Commission in place, to do something about this. And this is the European Green Deal, where we also committed and put into law to become the first carbon neutral continent, if you want, by 2050. And of course, California, we look also at California because there's a bit of competition there, maybe on when we can reach that. But also there, this 55% of reduction by 2030. 2030 is now, is very soon. And to do so, we will of course look at diversifying all the sources of fuels. We want to get away from fossil fuels. And of course, with another crisis that we have right now in Europe, with the war in Ukraine and situation with Russia there, it's another challenge. But at the same time, it is somehow comforting us in our vision that we need to accelerate this diversification and go towards renewable. And this hopefully will also help what we try to do in the transport sector. But just committing and hoping will not lead us there. That's why we also put in place, propose a number of specific regulation, like on limiting the carbon greenhouse gas emission of vehicles by 2035 to zero, basically. And actually, California beat us there for a few I guess, months, because it was just adopted a few weeks ago here in California. But we are right now in Europe between legislators coming to that. And there will be other measures. Now the question, and coming back to ITS, how digitalization and ITS can also contribute to that. And there really our vision is, and has been in the past, but more than ever, that smart mobility is one of the enablers of all those trends that we are seeing. Smart mobility also in Europe means putting in place the infrastructure, best using the data, the information that is available, whether from cars, whether from public transport, whether from what's happening also in other fields. You know, we see the emergence soon of, I will call them flying taxis, or urban mobility, urban air mobility, or advanced air mobility, new modes of transport coming into the picture, and how to make best use of all that. This will be thanks to data, innovation, technology. And one element on how to do that, you know, in Europe, at the European Commission, European Union, once we get a mandate from our member states, from the Parliament, to work on something, what we can do there is propose policies, legislation, but also funnel the funding and the money that we have into those projects. And that's what we are doing. And we are actually at this moment, specifically in the world of ITS, we are revising our framework for deployment of ITS, which is the ITS directive, to transform that into the framework for the deployment of cooperative ITS. Cooperative, not only with cars, cooperative meaning as a step towards a cooperative, connected and automated mobility across all modes of transport. This is our vision. This is what we try to do humbly to get to those goals.
Yeah, you raise a number of great points. On the cooperative part, there's a demonstration outside of a vehicle that is detecting a bicycle, which again, that's that idea of cooperation and also safety coming together, and then also helping to improve environmental goals. You mentioned COVID. I think that has been such a, I think we learned that technology just in our lives and how we work proved very critical in transitioning kind of our old world to the new normal, if we can call it normal. And on the transportation side, now it's like, okay, how do we apply technology? Because now that same sort of like Monday morning rush hour peak has been redistributed. Now it's more focused on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? And traffic patterns are different and transit. So there's a lot of opportunity there for discussion. But when you mentioned COVID and health, right? Because I think before we used to talk about moving cars and trucks, and now we're looking at the health and safety aspects of things. And I remember being in Melbourne for the World Congress, and if I heard it once, I heard it 1,000 times Melbourne, the most livable city in the world, right? And like over and over and over, and I was like, okay, no, we get it, we got it. But I remember doing a tour, and this lady gave us a tour saying, listen, we make a choice for signal preemption, right? Like the trolley goes first, and then the bicyclists, and then the pedestrian, and then if you basically can't even make a left turn down there, and it's this idea of if we want people to be more healthful in their commuting, we make choices that incentivize that. So from a New South Wales or even other perspectives, how are you using your agency to promote this public health?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things, and it's really pleasing that across all the PTAs in Australia at the moment, we're seeing strategies that are being changed to be really directed to place and community. And so as a transport agencies, obviously we always consider place, but now place has become more focused in everyone's strategy around what we're doing and creating places for people. So in New South Wales, we're doing things like creating 30-minute cities and 15-minute neighbourhoods. So that allows people to work closer and to live closer. But it also means that the uptake of active transport measures can also be more effective. So similar to everywhere in the world, we saw uptake in active modes during COVID. And so since COVID, we've invested heavily in new cycleways and infrastructure for cycling. We're a little behind Europe in it sounds like some of the other places in the US, but certainly electric bikes are also very, very popular. But so I think we're doing a lot around places for people, even our interchanges. We're reimagining interchanges as sort of local mobility hubs that are much more pleasant, particularly for people with accessibility issues or disability issues. We use virtual and augmented reality for people to be able to navigate places. As we talked about, for decarbonization, to make the places, much healthier as well. So there's a range of small and big programs of work that are going on in Australia, but really with community and people at the heart. And rather than just thinking about transport nodes and transport corridors, but really thinking about community health, and certainly accessibility and equity is really key to every strategy you're seeing now in Australian transport.
Yeah, definitely. Everett, for Washington, D.C., obviously the speed limit reduction is pretty big. I also know that when we were meeting when I was with ITS America, looking at some of the changes to like K Street and some of the others around prioritizing transit, this idea of using transportation for health and using technology for public health, how does that play out in your day-to-day?
Yeah, well, we're being very deliberate and very intentional when it comes to the infrastructure that we're putting in place as it contributes to health benefits, also as it contributes to improving the climate. So you mentioned K Street Transitway, and Margaret, we're actually talking a little bit about that in the backstage. That is a major investment in infrastructure project, about $180 million, that's going straight through the downtown corridor of Washington, D.C., right along the financial district. It's a major streetscape that will give us, again, another dedicated car-free lane. It will allow us to be able to put in infrastructure for protected bike lanes, and also put in infrastructure that will support pedestrians who are walking and crossing the street much more safely. So we're really excited about that. That particular project actually, we'll actually break ground next year in 23, so I'm really excited about that. But in addition to that, there's other things that we're doing in Washington, D.C. to help contribute towards improving the climate and the economy. And so I had referenced a little bit earlier about all the infrastructure put in place. But one of the things we're really trying to do is make sure that people understand that they have the options. Whether it's the bus, whether it's the car, they have the infrastructure we're putting in where we may have had traditionally more or not as many transit options in some neighborhoods. So we're going into those under-resourced communities, putting this in place, making sure they know they have these options, making sure they're safe and that they're affordable, and also that they're reliable. So we're really excited about what's happening in the district, and we feel like this is going to be the turning point. And the last thing I'll just add is that this time next week, I'll be heading out to the Netherlands. They invited us because of our infrastructure, bicycle infrastructure, to go in and look and evaluate their infrastructure by bike. So we'll be kind of biking all over the country of Netherlands and really kind of taking back some things that we can actually do and incorporate in Washington, D.C., and then also sharing some of our best practices with them as well.
Yeah, I think that is one of the great things that I've always experienced with the ITS World Congress is you get to go to different parts of the world and see, what's going on. I think in the U.S. we got warm mix asphalt from a European tour, and there's just all these great ideas that are out there, and would love to hear what you learn when you're there.
Sure.
Margaret, I want to maybe give you this next question from something you said earlier. You talked about the generational challenge, right? Of like folks maybe who are just used to a certain way of things, and then that collision of baby boomers and Generation X and Generation Z, and so how do you like reconcile all of those different viewpoints? And it's not just those people, but then also like curb space becomes much more valuable in a city when you've got rideshare, and now we're moving into urban air mobility. So how do you sort of like start to bring together, and this is great, you have a great background for this too.
So the wars between things like things you're very familiar with, parking spaces. Do we take some of those parking spaces and dedicate them to another use? Is there a way to share that better? And so that's one of the things on that Hennepin Avenue South, that 1.4-mile segment I showed you of the BRT route, that became a really big flashpoint. And we had people who wanted a 24/7 dedicated busway, even though the system doesn't run 24/7. And we also had people who didn't want the busway really at all. They didn't want the bike lane at all. They'll use sort of anecdotal evidence. I never see anyone biking here. Why is this important? And part of the answer is, right now I promise you, if you went down that 1.4 miles, you would not want to bike on the street either. Neither I wouldn't want to. And so being able to make this change is, I think, really about finding those reasonable compromises. We're reconstructing this street for the next 60 years. We need to find a way to really navigate the next 5 to 10 years to be able to get through the sharing of the different uses. And so we're going to do that with the dynamic bus lanes. We're keeping everything else. I think the other part of it that our mobility folks have worked on in my department is finding some grant money to do ambassadorship. And so they are actively working at the micromobility hubs to help people get more comfortable in using micromobility, especially people over, I hate to say this, 50, I'm over 50, but that is the case, that you find that people in the older generation are sort of wondering, well, what does it all mean? I mean, how would I engage with this? I think that's where the EV car share is really important, because it allows people to try something out near one of those micromobility hubs, have a good experience, and then also be able to maybe use an electric bike for the first time. Our shared bike fleet is going more and more towards the electric side of things. I personally, during COVID, bought an electric bike. I love it. I think it's, I don't need to be out there doing a road race or something. I need to get to work. And I need to get to work and not, be sweat drenched or, absolutely frozen. And so having that electric bike, I think, is another way that we help go over those barriers to get to that goal. Remember, the goal, when I go back to the plan, is to move 3 out of 5 trips in Minneapolis out of a single-use car into another mode. And so partnership with our transit agency is so important. We run the right-of-way, right? That's what the city controls. So we need to be able to utilize and use that right-of-way that benefits that goal. And I'd say that's one of the biggest things. And part of it's communicating the plan. And Shaylin, you and I have talked about this a lot. When I was the commissioner in Minnesota and part of the AASHTO group, we talked a lot about communicating change for people. And I think at the heart of it, what is transportation about? Transportation is about people. It's about connecting people to the people they love, to work, to things they care about. And sometimes we can get really lost in the new, the shiny, the planning language, but what we have to remember, this is about people. We have to speak to people, and we have to come across these divides in a way that has us both decarbonizing the transportation sector and having, frankly, universal design, meaning that for equity, we design things that are going to be implemented to the people who need them the most, race, economic status, and it should work for everyone. But we're probably going to implement that first at the level that is going to be the most impactful for the most impacted community.
Yeah, that's, I think you raised a couple of good points. I think, building a facility for 60 years, I was just reflecting, it takes in the United States about 12 years to deliver a major project. And if you were going to go deliver a major project when we were in Delaware in 2010, it would be getting built this year. And in 2010, we didn't have ride sharing. We didn't have electric bikes. We didn't have electric vehicles for the most part. And so how do these stakeholders, interface and build this infrastructure that's 60 years, it's going to last for 60 years or 100 years on the technology that exists today that's going to get delivered in about 10 years. I think this is part of our conundrum as a community and just bridging those gaps. Gizem, from a health perspective, I think that you touched on this, and I'd love for you to elaborate on this, is this idea of using transportation, active transportation, to promote public health. So, from your perspective, how can technology be a tool in driving that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned already, but certainly active mobility and promoting active mobility is something at the center of also what we do. We have drawn up a plan which is called the Sustainable Smart Mobility Strategy back 2 years ago, where we have all those measures set out there in terms of greenhouse gas emission in transport, in terms of smart mobility. But certainly we also have one central element there. It is our urban mobility framework, because of the way that Europe is constructed around cities and the importance of those. And there, in this plan, we have specifically actions to continue promoting active mobility. The good news, if I may say so, or the good experiences that we have collectively gained also from COVID times, where at that time, because there was no traffic any longer, some mayor decided to have pop-up bike lanes for people to go around, contributing to the activity and also allowing them to move in times when there were restrictions. This has been, in certain cities, something which has stayed. And it brings me to this other notion. Can you also work on the demand? Can you curb mobility? More than 10 years ago, when I was talking to people about how the system will develop, there was this notion that curbing mobility is not an option because the demand in terms of mobility of people, transport of goods, will continue growing. But what we see emerging now, post-COVID, and not only about bike lanes, is a number of cities building some restrictions to the car pressure, if you want, reducing the number of lanes and transforming those into bike lanes, or sometimes just abandoning one lane, and to see what is the effect on this. Interesting, I talk about Brussels because I'm from Brussels, and I was there in June before 3 years ago. In Brussels, they've done that in the last 5 or 10 years, not systematically, but punctually. They've reduced one lane in one of those main arteries getting from the suburbs into the towns. What has been the effect in terms of congestion? You would expect, wow, fantastic, it will increase congestion. Effect has been none. It was still the same. The commuting time for those choosing to come by car was the same. They've done that again after COVID. Again, people tended to adapt. Maybe with the experience of COVID, they realized that there are alternatives. The point is that you have to bring the options, the alternatives, because this will have, and I come back on health, positive effects, and we are on that path. But also, I argue that when you talk about health, you have also to look at what I call the road safety general elements, because this is a health issue, this is public health issues. We cannot afford to have 20,000 people in the European Union die on the roads, more than 200,000 severely injured, more than 800,000 per year lightly injured. We cannot afford that. This is also a public health issue that we have to take care of. And that's where this change of vision from a mobility which become more multimodal, bringing together all those elements and where technology plays a role on showing what are the options, that is one of those visions. You know, very popular term, mobility as a service. It's gaining ground, it's developing, it's articulating. We still need different pieces of the puzzle, but that should be the vision, of course, that we would aim for, that will also bring benefits in health, safety, etc.
Yeah, that's we often talk about like sort of like public health and lose sight of the fact that with all of the fatalities, I remember being at US DOT in 2009, and we were cautiously optimistic because we had gotten down to 30,000 fatalities a year on American roadways, and we were like, well, let's go towards zero. And just last year, I think it's up to 42,915. And I don't know, we talk about it, and we talk about it ad nauseum. And so hopefully this idea that we can harness technology to finally, start to get that number down, because it's great that we improve air quality, it's great that we, provide mobility, but if we don't stop killing people, right? It just feels like it's just high time.
Can I add? I think it's a really important point. The ability to demonstrate. When you ask about generational change, I think one of the other things that is showing promise in Minneapolis is that right outside our city hall, so 4th and 4th, a few years ago, the previous director shepherded through the type of bike lane I showed you on the picture, where it is actually up next to the pedestrian walkway, and then at one of the corners, it is narrowed, the throat is narrowed, so your walking distance is narrowed. On the opposite corner, basically walking across from 4th to 5th, it is not narrowed. So I'll tell you what one of my most effective tools is right now. When I'm talking to a policymaker and say to them, on your street, we're going to be doing a street reconstruction, we're going to be narrowing the throat of the street, and they say, well, what does that mean, or what is it? I say, here's an experiment. Just go outside today. Walk across the street from 4th Street and where it's narrower, and see how that feels versus walking the other direction across 4th Avenue. It is the #1 thing I can do for people that shows them that psychologically that is a very big difference. It is much safer. And what motivates that for me is, in my bio, you might read this, I was elected at one time to the legislature for 12 years. A longtime constituent a few years ago, after I was out of office, was walking in downtown Minneapolis. He had taken his car in to get his tires changed, an elderly man named Larry Gibson. Larry was killed when he was crossing an intersection where he had the right-of-way. Now, I think we all have someone like Larry Gibson in our life, in our work, that motivates what we do. That throating of the street, that ability to, make that distance shorter, to use a better timing of the signal, to make that driver more aware that they are going to possibly encounter a pedestrian or a cyclist or someone on a scooter is very, very important here. And it's a real motivating factor. But I would say demonstrations, even if they're, pop-up dining during COVID, as a commissioner of transportation, restaurateurs were like, please help us. And we did. And you know what we found? People loved it. And I think that that's where we can do some much shorter experiments and pilots to be able to help educate people and then fully implement after that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and if you look at some of the great cities around the world, they're the ones who are sort of reclaiming some space now and saying, you know, it doesn't just have to be about vehicles, it's about moving people and moving, you know, and just creating this like sense of it's a place, as you were mentioning. So we're coming down to the last 10 minutes. So maybe for this last question, we'll maybe just keep it to a couple of minutes each. But you know, there's always this challenge of getting the public sector and the private sector to work on the same scale, have the same motivation. You know, public sector loves a pilot, whereas private sector loves like, let's get something that scales and can actually pencil. So how are you in your respective places trying to bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think for us, and COVID's a really good example of a lesson that I hope we've learned, and we continue to learn that habit going forward. But we were able to do things at record pace during COVID. So things like using AI to detect boardings on transport or people wearing masks and those sorts of things. So typically for us, getting privacy approval to use AI to do anything is particularly difficult. But there was a public need for this, and there was government will, and it allowed us to create this really amazing shared vision between commercial and government sectors to just really get things done. And I think we're on the record in New South Wales of saying that we can't do things by ourselves. So, and even in the way we operate, we have an open data portal as well. So, you know, we put our data in a public portal to allow the corporate sector to commercialise that and to build products or apps or things that then can be used for communities. So I think in Australia there's a realisation that we kind of need each other if we're going to get the outcomes that we need. And, you know, government's good, and, you know, I say this with a government hat on, but we're really good at talking about things, and we're really good at convening lots of meetings and sessions and those sorts of things. I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is the ability to turn those conversations and those engagements and collaborations into actions, and hopefully we can keep that going into the future.
You can always have a good meeting.
We love a meeting.
Love
Yes,
a meeting,
we
love a memo, love a policy.
Yeah, indeed.
To get that big binder off the wall behind me.
Indeed.
But I believe the CEO for Transport for New South Wales comes from the private sector, came from airline industry.
He does, and as I do. So,
Yeah.
you know, I've been in government now for a year and a bit, but there's a nice mix now and a nice tension, I think, in the agency of people who have and don't have government backgrounds.
Yeah, it's always good to get that mix. Everett, you know, I know there's always like everybody coming to you in DC saying, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? And then you have to go back to your constituents and say, let's see how we make this great. So how do you balance that public sector, private sector approach?
Well, you know, we encountered just recently, got our first P3 off the ground. And we talk about major construction projects averaging about 12 years from when you're, you know, concept to implementation. It took us about 8 years when we got started. And we will go to construction next year as well in January, actually in a few months. But this is a P3, a public-private partnership that is allowing us to replace about 75,000 of our street lights and alley lights in Washington, D.C. This will allow us to be able to replace them with LED, high-energy LED lights, and, you know, it gives us the capability of being able to control those remotely. Also gives us capability of being able to see when an outage occurs and be able to respond much more quickly and much faster. But the other thing that it does in terms of kind of like a health benefit, recognizing that in some neighborhoods and some of our under-resourced communities, there may be some challenges, and so it does allow us to be able to control the lighting in that sense where we might need to adjust it and increase it, because we do know that when you kind of put a light or spotlight something, it does help to kind of eliminate and disperse individuals and people that are gathering. So we're really excited about that. This is the district's first P3, public-private partnership. And the company that won the bid and is doing this with us, they're assuming 100% of the cost up front. So the district is not financing any of it. There will be some back-end costs, of course, if they meet all the deliverables, but it's something I think is going to be a great benefit, a great win for the residents and visitors who come to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was just thinking of the remotely operating the lighting and stuff. I remember when I first started in transportation in Kentucky, there was like people who would go out and drive the roads at night to see the lights that were out, right? Or we'd go out and get people to like count potholes or these things. And now with data and with technology, we're able to just harness that. And it's great that you guys are getting that P3 going because that helps let the public sector take the risk and the private sector bring their capital. Margaret, from a public-private perspective in Minneapolis?
So first I'll say this is my first ITS, so I'm excited about this. This has been a great experience already. Before I became the commissioner in Minnesota, I actually ran a technology association, a business association, for 8 years. So I find this a very natural place to be, where we would be working together, where government is not going to be able to make those cutting edge, bleeding edge investments where the private sector is, and then we need to be able to utilize them together. And I really think about how, where are our next steps? I mentioned this already, the near-miss analysis and intersections using AI and other technologies will be important to us to deliver on our plan, our equity plan, and our Vision Zero plan. And that is not something that the city of Minneapolis is going to develop. So we really need all of you. And then the other part of it I think about is procurement reform, actually. And Minneapolis is doing procurement reform right now to be able to allow department heads to more directly, after going through a process, without having to go through council approval, which really slows everything down. And so I'm excited about this because I think it's going to allow us up to certain dollar amounts to work more quickly in deploying important technology for the benefit of people. And that's what I think is super exciting. Not always the top line of things you see, but procurement reform is actually really important in being able to have successful public-private partners.
Yeah, if you can't get it to market, then it doesn't work. And just hearing about the public sector and the bleeding edge, I work with a lot of tech people, and they're always like, I always tell my people to fail and fail quickly. And in the public sector, you never go out and really screw something up today so you can learn, right? Because then you end up in the newspaper, and that never works well. So yeah, Gizem, just the public-private partnerships and how you guys are exploring those.
This has become the new normal for the European Commission as well. We used to have a lot of research programs, funding for research, funding for deployments, and inherently in those programs, the idea was to bring people together from different companies, etc. Now, with all those challenges that we are facing, whether in the climate change or on safety, we go one step beyond because we've seen the benefits of those I would say the premises, all those research programs, projects that have been going on. But we've seen also that some of those have turned into early deployment phase. And the challenge is to bring those technologies, or ITS, to bring them into large-scale deployment. So just giving an example on road safety and cooperative systems, as a European Commission, on the one hand, we're supporting companies to come together and do research. We're also pushing for a framework on the regulatory side to make this happen. But the success was when the member states or the road authorities, together with some of the OEMs, decided it was time to deploy DSRC-based technology. And today, the success is that there are 1 million cars in Europe which are equipped with technology, 20,000 kilometers equipped with cooperative ITS systems. And to build on that, because now we want to go to most of it, we also have put in place a new partnership called the Cooperative Connected and Automated Partnership, because the next step is automation. What will it bring us? So we need all those people together from the public and private. It's working. We do that in all sectors, by the way. We also have partnerships in the maritime sectors. Historically in aviation also, we have several of those. It is working to bring research in early deployment and then more deployment. So we are on top of it.
Yeah, you know, and I would say I love the fact that you, you know, have that sort of optimistic tone, because I think that, you know, sometimes we can get a little bit frustrated, right, by the pace of change. But, you know, I would just say in closing for this panel, I think that, you know, it is a time of great hope and of great optimism that we can finally harness technology to make a difference in this climate fight, to make a difference for people who are underrepresented, to make a difference in equity. And, you know, Margaret, when you were talking about the scooter, I remember seeing just last week in DC, you know, a few people on a scooter, and I realized that they're not flouting the rules. Like, that's their family transportation, right? And you know, so we just need to be cognizant, because many of the people who make the decisions, you know, don't have those sorts of challenges, and so we need to be very inclusive as we move forward. But please join me in thanking the panel for a great discussion this morning.
Thank you.
So I get it right.
Thank you to our panel for their great discussion. And before everyone gets up, I want to make sure that we give these industry awards out. So it's my pleasure to present our industry award to Beep. Many of you may have heard of Beep. You may have heard of them because they were providing electric autonomous shuttle service in Yellowstone National Park. It was the first national park to have this service. But Beep also provides a community in Orlando, Florida, with an alternative mobility network, solving first and last mile transportation gaps with these low-speed autonomous electric shuttles. Their network operates 7 days a week with a fleet of 8 shuttles and eliminates the equivalent of 3 to 4 private car trips. Their network connects more than 10 key destinations, including medical centers, academic institutions, and integrated on-demand ride-hailing capabilities. Their network in Lake served as a baseline for safely advancing the testing of automated shuttles, the expansion of Beep-led tests and projects across the country for planned communities, public transportation agencies, and, as I mentioned, the first autonomous shuttle project in the U.S. national park setting. So with that, I would like to invite Joe from Beep up to the stage to receive the award. Congratulations. We'll go here.
Hey, good morning. We had a bit of confusion in that I was given 90 seconds to speak, and I had prepared for 90 minutes, so bear with me, I'll speak quickly. But first and foremost, on behalf of our team, we're certainly humbled and very appreciative for this recognition. When we formed Beep a few short years ago, and it was really reassuring to hear the importance of so many of these topics among the panelists this morning, but focused on how do we provide greater access to mobility, alternative means of transportation. How do we have a material impact on the environment and safety? You know, it's you hear in these staggering statistics of the fatalities on our roadways in the United States, 42,000 over last year. 94% of those being caused by human error, impairment, or distraction. That is why these autonomous platforms are so key and why we need to advance the use of these to save lives, obviously eliminating the most impactful area of these fatalities is critical going forward. I did want to comment on our partners at Lake Nona in Orlando, Florida, and again, to reinforce some of the importance of the public-private partnerships. That project has been operating for over 3 years, 7 days a week, and moving tens of thousands of passengers and eliminating, many, many metric tons of carbon emissions, and yes, impacting safety and how we move people around that 18 square mile community. These efforts are not possible without public-private partnerships. The developer there, Tavistock Development Company, has an eye on the future and wants to be part of this innovation. And they've taken the lead in really investing in this mobility network and the impact that it's having in that particular community. But I'll also state that we've done this in partnership with NHTSA and their test programs with the Florida Department of Transportation, the City of Orlando, Orange County, Lynx, our public transit operator. All of those organizations play such a key role in our success and in these projects, these initial test projects and programs. The last thing I'd just like to comment on briefly is just recognizing several of the great organizations we've had a chance to work with over the last several years. Those that get out on the front of this wave of transportation and mobility, we believe are going to be those leaders in the future as these platforms advance. Certainly last year on this stage, the Jacksonville Transportation Authority was recognized for this Hall of Fame award, and their program there represents, we think, globally the most advanced initiative in the deployment of these autonomous shuttles anywhere in the world. Other partners, Mattamy Homes down in Port St. Lucie, Florida, Peachtree Corners in Georgia, doing some of the most advanced testing of connected infrastructure out there. The City of Orlando, the National Park Service, as was mentioned, and so many other great visionaries that we have the opportunity to partner with. So again, thank you very much, and a pleasure to be here today.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm A.C. Yamamoto, the Secretary General of ITS Pacific. I'm very glad to announce the Hall of Fame Industry Award in Asia Pacific. The winner is Lexus Australia. Congratulations. Lexus Australia has been pioneering automotive CITS research in Australia for the last 4 years. To improve safety, Lexus Australia undertook the trialing advanced vehicle communication of safety messages in Queensland Ipswich Connected Vehicle Pilot. In addition to V2V communication, V2I traffic signal information, and important road network V2N updates were successfully demonstrated in conjunction with Queensland Government's transport and main roads. This activity informed participants of technology readiness and pathway to a wider implementation. Today, the name of the person who will receive this award, this ceremony, is Mr. Laus. Please.
Thank you. Thank you. Look, on behalf of Lexus Australia, may I say that firstly I'd like to thank the ITS World Congress Organisation Committee. They've done a great job today, and it's great to have everyone together again. A special thanks likewise to ITS Asia Pacific. In particular to Yamamoto-san. I'm very pleased. I know Yamamoto-san, and he's always been a big supporter of Australian operations. And of course, to the ITS Australian operations and the team. A big thank you to you for your support and commitment to road safety. Importantly, I think from Lexus Australia's perspective, we're quite humbled to receive this, and this is a great acknowledgement for the great passionate team that is out there that is committed likewise to the cause of road safety. And I think, as has been mentioned, we'd also like to thank our partners, and this has been a great project which has incorporated, again, the concept of government and industry uniting with a common cause to improve road safety. And I think to our teams who are here, some of them are here today, thank you for your passion to be able to do this, particularly with the difficulties that have occurred over the past 2 years. And I think that again goes to the great passion that they have. And this has actually now inspired us more to ensure that we continue our cause with our partners to fight for that zero fatalities from road accidents. So thank you very much for the acknowledgement, and again, thank you. Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, the third one in the row, last but not least, I have a surprise for you. On behalf of ITS Europe, where I'm the CEO, I'm very happy to announce to you that a nice country in Europe will win, with a nice company there, the award. Have you ever been in Vienna? Well, you should be. It's beautiful. It's Austria. The winner of our award is ASFINAG. ASFINAG is nominated for its Vision 2030. Being a reliable, innovative, and sustainable mobility partner, they connect regions in Austria. They connect people in the real heart of Europe, with a heart and warm heart. The ASFINAG team is great, doing great developments in Europe. They were behind the European Commission's C-Roads program on CITS. They have a landmark on that, and they develop quite some good services on connected and automated driving together with the Austrian and the European community. I'm very pleased to hand them over, and can I ask the representative, Bernd, from ASFINAG to come into the floor and give him a round of applause. Congratulations.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me start with a question. Why would it be cool to work in infrastructure business? It's usually slow and comes with a huge legacy. Let me give you my personal answer. If you have a vision and a solid financial background, such as tolling, then you can create really ambitious and amazing solutions that really make a difference for society. That's what keeps my team and me going, and has been for 18 years now. I want to thank ITS Europe and in special Mr. Van Tommy. It really is a pleasure and it is an honor to be recognized in such a field of business for using digital technologies to make traffic safer, more efficient, and more environmentally friendly. It is really a great pleasure. ITS is also a team sport, and so let me express my gratitude to Manfred Harrer and our colleagues from ITS Services who do an outstanding job and have been doing this for years now. It is really a privilege to have you all on the team. Now, what's next for the future? We heard a lot about the challenges today, and of course we have similar challenges in Europe. What we think is we have to do is further improve our digital infrastructure to be able to integrate in a mobility system that covers public transport, but also connected and automated vehicles, and we want to play our role there and contribute to a safe and working mobility system. We will do this by employing, of course, CITS, but also other stuff like sensor fusion, AI, edge computing, and a lot of technologies that will help us to really blend into an integrated system. With that, let me thank you again and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.